August 8, 2017, the world held its breath. In a statement that sounded less like a president and more like a catastrophic warning from the Old Testament, Donald Trump threatened North Korea not with sanctions and not with diplomacy, but with fire and fury. The media called it unhinged. Diplomats called it reckless. The doomsday clock ticked 10 seconds closer to midnight. The consensus was clear. The man in charge of the nuclear codes was unstable. But what if that was the point? What if the volatility, the anger, and the unpredictability wasn't a flaw, but a feature? A weaponized psychological tactic designed to freeze enemies in terror. This isn't just Trump. This is a ghost from the Cold War. This is the Madman theory. To understand the strategy of the 45th president, we must first look at the 37th. The year is 1969. The Vietnam War is a bleeding ulcer for the United States. Richard Nixon wants out, but he cannot look weak. He needs the North Vietnamese and their Soviet backers to believe he is capable of anything. Nixon told his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, "I call it the Madman theory, Bob. I want the North Vietnamese to believe I've reached the point where I might do anything to stop the war. We'll just slip the word to them that, for God's sake, you know Nixon is obsessed about communism. We can't restrain him when he's angry, and he has his hand on the nuclear button." It wasn't just talk. In October 1969, Nixon launched Operation Giant Lance. He ordered nuclear-armed B-52 bombers to fly directly toward the Soviet border. The pilots didn't know it was a bluff. The Soviets didn't know it was a bluff. The goal? Terror. In game theory, this is known as the rationality of irrationality. If your opponent knows you are perfectly rational, they know exactly how far they can push you before you push back. They can calculate your response. But if you convince your opponent that you are irrational, that you don't care about the costs or mutual destruction, their calculations break down. They cannot predict you. And when you cannot predict the man with the gun, you tend to back down. Fast forward 50 years. Enter Donald Trump, a man who built a brand on being unpredictable. Whether by instinct or design, Trump became the perfect vessel for the Madman theory in the 21st century. Traditional diplomacy relies on protocol. Everything is scripted. Trump shredded the script. He questioned Article 5 of NATO. He started trade wars with allies. He threatened to withdraw troops from everywhere. His Twitter feed became a direct line of psychological warfare. But let's look at the data. Did it work? Take North Korea. For decades, US presidents used strategic patience. It failed. Kim Jong-un kept building bombs. Trump switched to strategic insanity. He called Kim Little Rocket Man. He bragged about the size of his nuclear button. And then, silence. The missile tests paused. The two leaders met. It was a diplomatic spectacle that no rational president would have attempted. Supporters argued that Kim Jong-un came to the table because he genuinely believed Trump might bomb Pyongyang on a whim, or considered the killing of Qasem Soleimani, a strike so brazen, so outside the norms of escalation, that many analysts predicted immediate war. But Iran's response was measured. Why? Because the calculus had changed. The assumption was, if we escalate, this man might actually do the unthinkable. However, the Madman theory is a high-wire act performed without a net. And it has a fatal flaw. It relies on credibility. You have to be crazy enough to scare them, but sane enough to stop before the world ends. If you do it too often, two things happen. 1. The enemy gets used to the noise. 2. The enemy believes you aren't bluffing and strikes first. In 2020, as tensions rose with China, General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was reportedly so terrified that Trump might launch a rogue attack that he secretly called his Chinese counterpart to assure them the US was stable. This reveals the paradox. When the Madman strategy works too well, it doesn't just scare the enemy, it scares your own generals. It scares your allies. It destabilizes the very system you are trying to lead. Furthermore, dictators like Putin or Xi Jinping are not easily bluffed. They run long-term strategies. A 4-year term of chaos is a blip on their radar. If the madman acts erratically, but never actually pulls the trigger, the mask slips, the madman becomes the barking dog. Moreover, the normalization of this theory has triggered a dangerous geopolitical contagion. When the superpower at the helm of the global order abandons predictability, it grants permission for rival actors to embrace chaos. We see echoes of this in Vladimir Putin's nuclear rhetoric regarding Ukraine, or in the aggressive posturing of smaller states. The madman theory, once a specific tactical tool, risks becoming the new standard dialect of international relations. We are moving from a world of mutually assured destruction to a world of mutually assured delusion, where every leader is incentivized to act as unstable as possible to gain leverage. Beyond the military theater, there is the silent, often overlooked economic cost of performative insanity. Global markets and long-term alliances thrive on stability, not caprice. When a leader weaponizes uncertainty, they inadvertently levy a chaos tax on their own nation. Investors pull back, supply chains fracture, and the intangible asset of trust, which takes decades to build, evaporates in the span of a single social media post. The madman strategy might win a tactical standoff, but it erodes the strategic foundation of soft power that makes a superpower truly dominant. Finally, we must reckon with the acceleration of warfare itself. In Nixon's era, a nuclear decision had a buffer of time. Hours for B-52 bombers to reach Soviet airspace, creating a window for cooler heads to prevail. Today, that luxury of time is gone. With the advent of hypersonic delivery systems and AI-driven defense grids, the decision loop has shrunk from hours to mere minutes. In this algorithmic age, a feigned act of madness can be misinterpreted by an automated system as a genuine first strike. The madman theory assumes the opponent is human and can feel fear. It does not account for a machine that simply calculates a kill probability. As Donald Trump remains a central figure in global politics, the question returns. In a world currently on fire, with war in Europe and the Middle East, is the madman theory a necessary deterrent? Some argue that in an age of autocrats, a polite, predictable president is seen as weak. They argue that fear is the only currency dictators respect. Others argue that with hypersonic missiles and AI warfare, the margin for error is zero. We no longer have the luxury of bluffing with the apocalypse. Whether Donald Trump is a master strategist employing Nixon's playbook, or simply a chaotic force acting on impulse, the result is the same. The world watches his every move, trying to calculate the incalculable. The madman theory proves one thing. The most dangerous weapon in a nuclear arsenal isn't the warhead itself. It's the mind of the person holding the launch codes, and that is a terrifying thought. If you want to explore more dark corners of history, hit subscribe.